Join us in this detailed tutorial from our expert trainer who walks you through each step. For an even more hands-on experience, you can download the course files linked below and follow along. Let's get started.
So let me introduce you to today's excellent instructor, Dave Consudo. Dave has been teaching for Simon Says It for a couple of years now, but let's start off with the basics. He has 2 master's degrees, one in instructional technologies, other in organizational psychology. He's really trained countless learners face-to-face, but also many others through his online courses. In fact, he's created a large number of courses for Simon Said alone, about 15, including courses for Adobe, various Microsoft products, Excel 365. So on that note, Dave, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Well, thank you, Simon, and thank you, everyone, for joining us. So welcome, everybody. So happy to be here. And this is going to be an intermediate formulas class. We're going to just go ahead and jump right in. So we have a whole series of content down below that we're going to be working with here. And you'll notice I'll be kind of drawing on my screen a little bit to kind of orient you, see where you're going to be at. All right. So if you're ready to go, let's go. I'm going to start off with something that seemingly does not seem related to formulas, and that is named ranges. Now, named ranges is a very sort of like universal fabric all throughout Excel, and especially when you are working with formulas. And it's going to allow you to implement your formulas in a much more efficient way, but also a cleaner way, right? So you're going to see what I mean. So let's just first name these ranges. So notice here I have this data right here, and I'm going to just give it a name so I can refer back to it later. And I'm just going to do a very, very simple one just for the purposes of an example. So I have this data and I want to then apply it to a formula later on. So all I'm going to do is just simply come over to here to something called my name box, something we've probably seen a million times with the cell values in there, but not necessarily giving it actual names. So all I do is simply click up there, and I'm just going to type out, let's just say Pony, and then I've just given it the name of Pony. I'll go ahead and do this one, call this one Dave. I can just type it out, hit enter, and I'll just go ahead and highlight this, call this one Rabbit. I can call it whatever I want as long as there's no spaces in between the 2 words. Now, how does this apply in real life if I'm ready to put this into a formula? So all I do now is I'm going to go over here to Pony where I want to sum. So I'm going to do equal sign, sum, and I'm going to use some keyboard shortcuts on this. I'm just going to hit the tab key right now, and then watch what happens if I type out PON. You're going to see that this pops up down below. I've now configured Excel to kind of be on my page with the name of that range that I've just created. I hit tab again, then I hit enter, and look at that. There it is. I double click on it and it says sum of Pony. So number 1, it was easy to implement. And number 2, look how clean that is. So if I'm collaborating with other people, they can say, hey, what's the sum of Pony? Not the sum of, A7 through D7. So let's go ahead and do the other ones real quick. This time I'll do, let's just say average. Tab. I'll just type out Dave, tab, enter. See how easy that is? I don't have to highlight anything at all. Let's do count this time. I'll say count, then RAB. Look at that, pops right up. I hit tab, enter, just like that. And of course, this is not dollars, so naturally I'd want to change that to a number. Great. So you can see how that works. And you can see all my name ranges, they all live over here. This is beautiful. And if you ever wanted to manage all of your name ranges and you wanted to change them or whatever you wanted to do, like change the orientation, change the name, you're going to see that in the Formulas tab, you have a whole section all dedicated to names. And then you can go over here to your name manager and you can see all of the names inside of that whole sheet. Really, really powerful stuff. If you're not doing name ranges, hopefully that changes today. So we're going to now do ifs. Okay, now ifs can be very, very scalable and very, very flexible. So just like how we say if in the real world, like if this, then that, that's essentially what we're doing with our data. So let me just go ahead and zoom in a little bit. And we take a look at this data and we have this amount, and we want to know whether this person or this trader is going to get commission. So I just want to do a very simple Y or N, depending on whether they get commission or not. And this one, we're going to do a formula. So if we break this down, you're going to see here, I have if B2 is greater than 10,000, then just say Y. If not, say N, right? Say no, right? You can see value if true, value if false. Okay, so let's go ahead and just put that out there. You can see how easy it is. Equal sign IF. I'm going to hit the tab key. I really like using the tab key because it opens it up with the parentheses. It also puts it in caps. So you can see if what? If this is greater than, okay, and then I'm going to say 10,000. Now notice I've now jumped over after I typed in my comma. I've jumped over to the next argument, which is value of true. I'm going to put in quotes because it's text. Now I'm going to say next one, again, doing the comma, and I'm just going to go open parentheses, open quotes, and then close out the quotes, and now close out the parentheses. And you can see absolutely not, that person does not get commission. But let's just go ahead and we realize there's a typo, 20,000, and it automatically now goes to Y. See how easy that is? Now, very simply, all I need to do is just do an autofill to go down here. So I'm just going to double click on that, and you can see, awesome. I'll go ahead and do that autofill again if you missed that. This time, let's see how we can use if for using a formula. Because in this case, I don't want to just say yes or no. I want to be able to do a calculation of sorts. Okay, so if they have reached that commission level, then I want to do some type of multiplication to say, hey, listen, they're going to get 5%, right? So you can see that's 5% of 12,000. Beautiful. So let's just see how that works. Very simple. Okay, so equal sign if, I hit the tab key. If this is greater than, still going to use my 10,000. Remember the comma to get to the next argument. Now I'm going to multiply. So I'm going to go ahead and do this formula. I'm going to say here, this times, and I could even say 5% here. It's kind of neat. I don't have to do a decimal. And if not, if it's false, I'm just going to say 0, right? Just like that. Close it out. And then that's great. That's 5% of that. And then you can see, awesome. There we go. There we go. Looks beautiful. You can see under 10,000, they don't get a commission. But then we realize that changes. So let's go ahead and bring this person up to 15,000. And you can see, there we go. Then their commission jumps up. So really straightforward, I hope, and pretty valuable for you. Now let's go ahead and take a look at another way that we can be doing if statements, right? So you can see here that we have dates side by side. So dates are considered values if you think about what Excel is doing for it, right? Basically it has these kind of very large serial numbers that can calculate dates the same way it calculates numbers. So you can see with this one, we're trying to figure out if this situation where we have the agreed settlement date and the actual settlement date. So in other words, are they late? So notice I have a greater than symbol. Okay, if G2 is greater than F2, then we're going to say it's failed, right? Because if it's greater than, then it means that they're late. Okay, so if this one is later than this one, then they're failed. Okay, so it's a simple thing. We're just using dates this time. So if we're going to do this one here, greater than, meaning is it later than this, then say failed. And then I put my comma in, value of false, then they are good. You can see here, that one is late. See that? And now I'll go ahead and just double click to come down there, and you can see all the ones that are on time, right? Maybe the same date, they get a good. And then the opposite happens if it's failed. Okay. Now, some of you may also notice that, how did I get this red here? Maybe some of you are wondering that. Maybe some of you know that already. That's something called conditional formatting. And I put a little note there for you. Those of you who have the files, you can see if you hover over it, this is conditional formatting. So I've just made it. So if you go to the Home tab, conditional formatting, you'll be able to see that I have this if the same situation, if G2 is greater than F2, then make it red. In other words, if is it later than that, then please make it red. So if I change this now, let's just go 7, 6. Okay, we'll be able to see, oh, this is actually 2025. So let's make this 2023. And you can see beautiful. It loses its color, and it also goes over here to good. And then this one, this is going to be just a very simple formula, again, using dates. And the formula in this case is to know how many days overdue. So think about how powerful this is, right? We're trying to really tell a story with our data. And not only do we want to know if they're late, but we want to know how late. So that's how really powerful this can be with a pretty simple formula. So you can see here, if G3 is greater than F3, in this case, actually, let's make this. This can be G2. Right, we'll see how we can correct this, no problem. Okay, and then we'll just go ahead and subtract these from that. You can see, right, this is going to be on time, right? Let's just go ahead, F2. Let's go ahead and do this one. So equal sign, if, and then basically we'll do the same thing, is greater than that, then value of true, we're just going to go ahead and multiply. Excuse me, we're just going to go ahead and do some subtraction. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this, minus that, and value is false. I'm going to go ahead and just leave this one empty. So you can see if you're going to leave something empty, all you need to do is put in quotes an empty space. You see that? That's all you got to do. If you don't want to have anything there at all, you can go ahead and just leave it empty, just like that. And you can see this is 5 days late. Okay, and then boom, the other ones, right, are empty because they're not due, right? They're not late. So you can see how nice that is, right? Only the ones that are in red, only the ones that are failed, then have those numbers there. So again, it's really about kind of storytelling, but doing it in a very automatic way. That is a good foundation of working with ifs because there's a lot you can do with it. And I just showed you 4 different examples of it to really kind of pry into your imagination how you can do it. And then also we talked about conditional formatting as well, which is also another great storytelling technique to be able to communicate what's going on in a very sort of inherent way without really having to think about it, or at least your audience having to think about it. Now we're going to jump over to here to, we have 2 calculated ifs. All right, so when I say calculated ifs, we're going to not only just do an if, but we're going to do a calculation based off of the condition. So if something meets the condition, then maybe we want to count how many there are. If something meets the condition, maybe we want to add up all of its respective numbers around that. Okay, now we're going to circle back to our named range discussion. Okay, so if I highlight all these names, all these categories here, I want you to notice that this is called the category named range. I highlight this. This is the sales prior. I also have it here for you too, so you can see down below what the named range is. We're going to be now using these inside of our formulas. So let me go ahead and zoom in a little bit so we can see, maybe that's a little bit too much. You can see here, we have this sum if and then category, and then we have the rest of it here. Notice how clean that is. We also have a count if sales current is greater than 15,000. So in this example, we want to know how many stores are meeting the current goals. Okay, so I'm going to do a count if because I'm counting how many stores are actually meeting the current goal of 15,000. Okay, so I'll go ahead and just do equal sign. I'm going to do count if. Notice that pops right up, so I'm going to hit the tab key. And then very simple, I just have the range and the criteria. That's it. So in this case, right, let me go ahead and zoom back out again. I'm going to, my range is category. Where does the range live that the criteria exists? So all I do is just type out category. You can see that right there. And then what is my criteria? My criteria is it's greater than 15,000. Close that out. I'm just going to go into my name manager and see what's going on. This is actually a good example of why we'd actually go into the name manager. Looks like I may have 2 categories here. So let's go ahead. I'm going to delete this one. All right, so therefore I'm not going to have as much confusion there. And I'll be able to actually see, it's actually kind of perfect, why we use the name range manager. So you can see that why did I go to the name range manager? Because I want to see what refers to what. That's beautiful. So now I can actually see what I'm working with here. And you might also have like sales goal and sales current possibly in there twice. So now I can refer back to this, equal sign, count if, and then my range is category. There it is, nice and neat. And then my criteria is greater than 15,000. And close it out. And then, so it's not going to be category in this case. I'm looking for sales current. So you can see what the categories I want to use with is going to be everything that's in the sales current that's over 15,000. I want to count how many. So if we look at the prior year, right now this is 12,000 for electronics. If I make this, let's say 20,000, okay, and then we can see sales prior year, and this one is for the sales current year. Okay, so you can see how we want to count up how many. So if we look, we have 20,000 here, we have this one here, we have this one there, and we have that one there. That should just be 4, right? For this one, we have the sales current. We have how many? We're counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 down below. You see that? How nice that is. It's counting it out for me. So if we change this one to say 30,000, that's going to now change dynamically. Okay, so you can see how that works, right? So the takeaway here is to see, number one, how we use a named range, and then also our criteria, which to show us that it was going to be just 15,000. Okay, if it's over that, then it's going to count it up. Now let's go ahead and jump over to a sum if. Okay, so in this case, we're going to be adding up something if it meets this criteria. Okay, so in this case, it's going to be more than one number here. Okay, so for all of my electronics, I basically want to kind of cherry pick out every single version of electronics. You can see here's electronics, 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 and all of its numbers. And I just want to add up their numbers. Earlier, what I did was I counted them. Okay, so if we take a look at this one, we have this 51,235. Well, if you add up electronics plus this one, plus, let's find that one, you're going to see way down below that number adds up. But I don't want to have to do that every single time, right? I want to be able to kind of cherry pick out the category as well as finding its respective numbers. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that same thing now here for total sales current. Okay, so we're going to find it everything within here. So if I now look at the syntax, I'm going to do sum if. The range this time is the category. Where am I going to find everything where electronics lives? Somewhere in here. But it doesn't know my criteria until I go to the next part of the argument. You can see there's criteria, and I'm just going to do electronics, right? You can see there that is, right? Electronics, that's my criteria. Now, you'll notice the next one is the sum range. What do you want to sum up? Well, I want to sum up the sales current. So all I'm going to do now is just type out sales and then sales current, right? Before I did sales prior, close it out. Now I can see I can count this up manually by my 56,000, everything that has to do with electronics, right? You can see I can add all those up, finding electronics from here, here, etc., going from there, just adding up all these numbers, and I'm going to get that 56,000 number. So think about this kind of like how your credit card company does it, right? So your credit card company, at the end of the year, they might tell you how you've spent on certain categories. This is essentially what they're doing, right? You spent this much on groceries, you spent this much on gas. So they basically aggregated all the content. Now, these next ones that I've already outlined here for you, I'm doing it in a slightly different way, okay? Because sometimes data is dynamic, meaning maybe you wanted to put something inside of where it says hardware, that data is going to change. So if I wanted to put jewelry here sometimes, or retail here sometimes, or electronics, I want this number to then reflect that. Okay, so let me show you here. I'm just going to go ahead and type out retail. Notice how that number just changed. Okay, let's do electronics. Notice how that number just changed. How did I do that? Well, if we look back at the formula, you're going to see here sum if category. Instead of me typing out the word electronics or jewelry, etc., I'm actually referring back to the cell, right? I'm actually going whatever is inside of G14, that is what's going to reflect my data. That's what's going to reflect my condition, and then therefore my sum. Okay, so if I go ahead and do that now, I'm going to go equal sign, sum if, and then what's my range? My range is in the category, right? And what does that mean again? It's going to be whatever's living inside of here. And again, I'm using a named range. You can absolutely just highlight these if you want to, as long as it knows where to find what? The criteria, right? So there I go. And all I'm going to do now is simply click here to then bring in that cell address, right? G14. Again, this becomes dynamic. Now, for my sum range, what am I looking at here? I'm looking at the sales current year, right? Notice how it pops right up because the named ranges. Thank you very much. And then I close this out. And now you can see exactly what I want, right? But this is for electronics, jewelry. Oh, you know what? We're actually working with hardware. Okay, no problem. Change that. And now look at that. Both numbers change. This is what we call dynamic, right? It's constantly paying attention. Some of you may be pretty expert at putting in drop-down menus. And this is a really, really excellent example of where you might put a drop-down menu in here because maybe you're trying to look at like first quarter, second quarter, third quarter. Maybe you're looking at individual clients and you just want to kind of build out a little dashboard. You can very, very easily do that. Okay, so you can actually create a little dashboard. So basically people can just kind of pick and choose from a list, and then this data then dynamically changes. Now, there's a few other ways you can practice this, and I just left these here for you, that you can do an average if, and you can also do average ifs, right, if you want to do multiple criteria. If we have a little bit of time, we'll check those out as well. But you can see there's a lot you can do here with just kind of some simple data to really get your juices flowing. So let me just go ahead and jump over to our next exercise. And this is going to be an if and or situation, and also an if and function. So this is what we call a nested function. Okay, so we have two functions kind of working together to be able to really, again, tell a really powerful story. So if we look at this one right here, you can see I have an if and an or kind of sandwiched together. So if we say it in real language, we're saying if either of these situations exist, then give them a bonus of 3,000. If neither of them do, then we're going to say no bonus. And you can probably guess that and both of the situations or all of the situations have to exist in order to give them the bonus. Okay, so you're going to see here, I'll go ahead and just say equal sign if, and then right away I'm just going to go over here to or. Right, so notice I have both of these. Now think about the if and the or as kind of like a little sandwich, right? Meaning that I have like my if is my little piece of bread on the sandwich, and then my or is the meat in my sandwich. So I'm going to say here, if, right, let's say whatever here is equal to full-time, right? Then what is my other thing that I need to have happen? Well, the job rating has to be greater than 4. Or let's actually say 3 in this case. Great. And then I close that out. And now guess what? I'm on the other side of my sandwich, because now I have to tell it if one of these things exists, then what do we want to do? I'm going to say 3,000. And if not, in quotes here, I'm going to say no bonus. Close that out. And you can see, well, this person is both full-time and 4, so it's a no-brainer. They're definitely getting it. Right? That's awesome. But let's go ahead and do a double click to bring this down. We're going to see this person got no bonus. Why? Because they're not full-time and their job rating is 3, which means that it's not greater than 3, right? And you can see this kind of running track here. So again, think about this from a storytelling perspective, right? The fact that we can actually cherry pick all this information and say, hey, if either of these things exist for me, automatically, right, I need to elicit some kind of response, whatever that might be. So if we take a look at the data one more time, go ahead and just break this down. This is my kind of first part of my sandwich, right? I'm just going to go ahead and break this out like that. And then we'll see here is the middle of it, which is just my or, right? So it looks a little intimidating, but if you really break it down, all we're doing is saying, hey, this is my if statement, but what is it referring to? If either of these things exist. Now, if we look at the and is going to be very similar, right? We'll just look at this here. We have the if right here, and then the other side of our if right there. The only difference here is going to be our and, which is the meat of our sandwich. And notice we have 3 criteria that need to be met. Now, again, all of the criteria need to be met because it's an and situation, not an or situation. So it's going to be a little more strict, isn't it? So if we get out of this now, do a double click here, we're going to see it's a lot harder to get a bonus because all 3 of those criteria have to exist. Hopefully that all makes sense to you, but also more importantly, you see the value in when you can do this. And probably equally as important, we can really kind of break down the syntax, because when you look at this at first glance, it can look very intimidating. But if you really break it down into each individual argument, just the if, and then the if on the other side, it actually starts to make a lot of sense. Some of you may be working with ifs like if with a VLOOKUP, right? Or something like that. It could be an if anything. Then you can then couch it together, also known as, again, a nested function. So let's go ahead and take a look at another really simple one called an if error. So if you have an error, you wanted to show something, right? So every time I have an error, because there's no data here, I want it to literally show this word error, no data. Right? Notice here, again, error, no data. If I change this, right, it now says, okay, great. There's no error here, so I'm going to put in the number. Okay, so let's just go ahead and see what this data is. So you can see I have if error, my first part of my sandwich, and then I'm referring to some type of calculation. If there's an error in B7 divided by C7, then put in that data, right? I just don't want it to show up as something really generic like an NA or a DIV. I want there to be some kind of words there. So that's what I'd set it up to do, right? As you can see, some of you may just want it to just say 0 or anything else you might want to do here. So let me go ahead and just show you how this would work. I'll go ahead and just do the top one. So we're going to say if error, pops right up there, and then it's going to be B7 divided by C7, and then value of error. Notice here I am in quotes. I'll just say no data. Okay, and then boom, you can see I have an issue there, right? And then no data. Beautiful. Earlier, you saw one that I had in red. How did I get that in red? Again, that's conditional formatting. I'm having my story kind of being fed for me with color as well as words. So if you recall, I went over here to the Home tab and I went to conditional formatting, highlight cells rules, and then you can see text that contains potentially, and I would just say no data. See that? It's as simple as that. Okay, that's in the conditional formatting. So again, about storytelling, about controlling the narrative with your data. So we're going to now switch up gears and go over to here to a VLOOKUP. Okay, we're going to talk about VLOOKUP, we're going to talk about HLOOKUP, and we're going to talk about XLOOKUP. Really, really powerful, where we can find data from another data set that we don't know that data, but we do know something about the data. So in other words, I have this employee ID that I do know, and I'm going to use that bit of data to find all the data that I don't know. This is what a VLOOKUP is going to allow us to do. Well, this other data happens to live on another sheet someplace else. See that? Okay, that's great. So I do know the employee ID, right? You see all that, but I don't know their names, etc. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to then use a VLOOKUP formula to go find all of this respective data. Now, I'm going to set us up here for success where we need to kind of identify what column number we're in, right? So our name happens to be in the second column of the data. The region is in the fourth column. Department is in the fifth. So if you forget these things, don't worry about it because you can always correct it. But for the first purposes of this, let's just remember that the name happens to live in the second column of this data set. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a VLOOKUP. So I'm going to do equal sign VL, right? You can see here, I'm going to do a VLOOKUP. And my lookup value is the first argument. The lookup value is the number that we know. That's the number that we're going to try to pair up with another one. So an example outside of this example would be, let's say somebody's phone number, right? Let's say a customer ID or a product ID. It's typically going to be something unique. Okay, so if I click on this now, you can see B5 is my lookup value. Then my table array. Well, where am I going to find all that, right? So my table array is like, okay, well, where's all your data, right? It's very simply put, it's pretty much everything over here, right? So I could highlight all this data. Okay, nice, really easy to do, but this certainly could have been a name range too. And now you can see my formula is still up here, which I think is actually kind of nice to stay here because if I went back here, then I wouldn't be able to count the number of columns. And that's what I'm about to do here because I need to know my column index number, right? My column index number, right, you're going to see is going to be what I'm working with here, right? So let's go ahead and do that one more time. VLOOKUP, have this all highlighted. Come over to here, my column index number. Maybe VLOOKUP, table array, highlight all my data. And then, once again, my column index number is what? I am trying to bring out the name. So my column index number essentially is me counting what column number it is that I want to extract out. And that's just this very simple, type out the number 2, And then I go to my next part here, and this I'm looking for an exact match. So it's just going to be false. I close that out, and you can see it is in fact Malcolm. If I change this to E007, that changes to Melissa James. So let's go ahead and see if that's right. You can see there's Melissa James. So let me go ahead and do that one more time. I'll go a little bit faster. Equal sign, VLOOKUP, lookup value, that's the number that I know, my unique value, my table array, highlight all my content. Again, this could be a named range. Comma, column index number. Well, what am I looking for? Let's just say I'm looking for their department, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Close it out, false. Okay, you can see there it is. Okay, and let's just change that now back to E001. Let's go back to Malcolm, and you can see how that changes very quickly. So if you look at all the data here inside of the arguments, the syntax, all we're looking at here is the lookup value. That's the number we know. Where are we going to find all the data, right? It's like, what city does my kind of long lost twin live in? Somewhere in this big bad city. But then boom, what house do they live in? We live inside column 2. And that's how we're going to bring out the name. And you can see here, that's going to be column 5 for the department. So if you're going to continue on with this, you just need to know earnings is going to be column 6, and then region is going to be column 4, and then it's going to show it up right there. And we're doing it from an external data set. It could be internal, it could be external, it could even be data from a completely external data set, right? Even outside of this workbook entirely. Now, let's go ahead and switch up gears a little bit, and let's take a look at an HLOOKUP. Okay, so a VLOOKUP is a vertical lookup, right? Remember how it was kind of going down to find all the employee IDs. So my unique values, right, were here. They were going down. This is all vertical. It's looking down for all of the employee IDs. In this case, for an HLOOKUP, it's going to be going horizontal, right? Hence the H. So if we think about the data and how it's set up, right, this data is set up to have our unique values on top. Earlier, our unique values were on the left. So they're not competing with each other per se, right? An HLOOKUP just has different data and a different setup, right? So it depends really on how you are setting up your data. So it could be, let's just say, it could be months of the year. It could be product names. It could be people. And your unique value that you're looking up just happens to be a column header as opposed to what? A row header. Okay, so let's go ahead and see how this one looks. So let me just do a little refresher, and I'm going to make this into a named range. So in case we forgot from the beginning, I'm going to use this as a named range. I'm going to highlight everything here, and I'll just call this profit, and then I'm going to say 2024. Okay, hit enter. And notice there's no spaces there. And now I'm going to use that as my named range. You can see how easy it is for me to incorporate this into a VLOOKUP. So we're kind of coming back full circle. So this time I'm going to do an HLOOKUP. So I do equal sign HL. It pops up. My lookup value is what? Well, this is the number I know. And this is what I'm going to kind of correspond and cross-reference to another one here. Okay, see that? So then I do comma to go to my next argument, my table array. Well, watch this. I'm just going to type out profit, and notice how profit 2024 now appears. See? Notice how much easier that is. Okay, nice and clean. It also communicates it. And now you'll see here there's this row index number. What did I see before? I saw a column index number. So in this case, I'm looking for the gross profit for quarter 1. Right? That's my goal. So what I need to do is count down from the top of my table array, 1, 2, 3, 4, and just type it out. Look at that, 4. Awesome. And then comma, false, because I'm looking for an exact match. And now we can see quarter 1 gross profit is in fact 25,000. This is the drop-down menu. Let's go to make this. Let's go to quarter 4. That changes to 30,000. You can see there that is right there. So you can see nice and easy. So I'll go ahead and do that one more time, a little faster. So HLOOKUP, my lookup array, same situation here. Type out profit. That pops right up. Notice how easy that is. This time, again, my row index number, my net profit, I got to count down. This is probably the weirdest, trickiest part here. I count down, and that's going to be 9, false, 22,000, quarter 2. Net profit is 22,000. So we're doing this really amazing kind of cross-reference, kind of do a little dance to be able to find your data. And again, because I'm using this cell, it allows it to be dynamic. So this changes. Okay, I'll just finish this up. HLOOKUP, lookup value, table array, profit, look at that, beautiful. Row index number, percent profit is going to be row 10. You can see there that is. And again, I want to be clear that this is row 10 within the table array. Don't put in 16. You might be tempted to do 16. That's not what Excel needs. It's basically the number row within the table array, right? Just so we're clear about that. 10, 16, they conflict. No, because the 10th row in this little pink box there. Beautiful. Have that there, 26%. Hopefully we see the value in that. So something that a lot of people don't typically use a lot of, not because it's not just as good, it's just that either they don't know that you can set it up on that particular data set, right? Or they're just, not necessarily using it. And that can really kind of lend itself to HLOOKUP quite well. Now, we're going to talk about XLOOKUP, which is sort of a relatively kind of new kid on the block here. And XLOOKUP is meant to sort of address some of the situations that VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP are missing, right? Namely, if you are working with a VLOOKUP, there's a limitation. What is that limitation? Well, if we look back at our VLOOKUP and we look at our data set, notice how what I'm looking up, right, what I'm cross-referencing is in the far left corner. That could be a problem because let's just say my data, I wanted to look up by social security number, right? I couldn't do that with a VLOOKUP because the data that I'm looking up, right, that I'm cross-referencing always has to be in the far left corner. So in the past, you'd have to do like an index and match and some more complicated formulas. Now you can do XLOOKUP. So if we look at this data here, I have my XLOOKUP and I have my data source, right? So I'm looking up what I'm trying to find my employee name in this data source 1. My IDs that I'm trying to cross-reference lives inside of the 4th column. Do you see that? VLOOKUP would be like, what? No, I can't do that. Okay, but that's not it's not a problem for an XLOOKUP. So we're going to go ahead and do this again manually, but once again, you can absolutely do named ranges. So maybe I'll mix it up a little bit. So let's go ahead and now we're going to do =, XLOOKUP. And let's look at the syntax this time. My lookup value, it's the number I know. It's the same one as we did with VLOOKUP as well as HLOOKUP. So I click on that. And then my lookup array, right? Notice how they're using the same words here. So I really like the language better with XLOOKUP as well. You can see, well, where does my lookups live? Well, I go to my data. We're going to see, well, it lives somewhere inside of column D here, right? You can see that. Beautiful. So I can go ahead and highlight everything. Let's go ahead and, so this is where a name range would come in nicely. I'll go ahead and highlight all 699 of these. That's super awesome. And then the next part of my argument is my return array. Well, my return array, what am I looking for? I'm looking for their names. Okay, so let's go ahead and highlight everything somewhere within there. It's going to find it. And now what's so cool about this is that I'm not done, because I have the ability to now also do an if not found. So what is this doing? This is saying if we have an error in this XLOOKUP, meaning that the data doesn't exist, employee doesn't work anymore, we don't have the products anymore, right? Then we want to put in an error message. Earlier, we did an if error for division, right? But now we can embed an if error inside of an XLOOKUP. If you're doing this with a VLOOKUP, you would have to do an if error nested function. In this case, we don't have to do that, right? I'll just go ahead and say no data found. Okay, close that out. And you can see, where's our data sources here? So there might not be any data for this one. Let's go ahead and see what's happening with this guy here. Try to find this. Let's go and see how. Okay, there we go. So I'll go ahead and show you what we're looking at. If we break this down, I have all the formulas already laid out here for us. So if we break this down, we can see that we have our lookup value. That's the guy we were just working with here. And then our lookup array, right? We're going to go, you can see here within our data sources, that's column A. And then we're going to see here, our data sources are going to be in column D. And then you're going to see in column A is what we're trying to yield, which is the name. Okay, let's break that down one more time. Let's look at this one. My lookup value is this one. My lookup array, column D. Return array, column A. Okay, you can see that, column D, column A. So if we break this down, we go back to where we were. Let's bring this back up here. Okay, all of column D, that's what we're looking up. And then all of column A, that's what we're bringing in here. So if I were now to go back to here, you're going to see that there is no data for certain ones of these, right? You see that? So it is bringing me that error message to show me, hey, you know what? There was no data available here. So therefore, I'm going to yield this message. So if I bring in another number, let's just go ahead and do 11809 for this one, 11809. Dynamically, it's now going to bring in Sperry Blair, right? See that? That's really nice, very easy to do. On some levels, right, the XLOOKUP is actually a lot easier to use because we're just going directly to the source. We don't have to worry about any kind of dynamic changes to it. We also, most importantly, don't have to rearrange our data to make it so the data that we're looking up is always on the far left. That's probably the most kind of common complaint that you hear from people, right? That the data is set up in such a weird way. And you know what? I can't deal with that. But in this case, our data sources, it doesn't matter where they live. With a VLOOKUP, it is going to matter.
Well, congratulations everyone for completing this course. So hope you enjoyed this class, hope you learned a lot, and we look forward to seeing you in future lessons. Thanks everyone.
What was your favorite part of this tutorial? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Visit the Simon Says It channel, explore our videos and training sessions, and decide what you want to learn next.